of point. He's got to do some copies. In case you are wondering about the area again, we keep appraised of where these fellows were living, and a lot of the events that we're going to be finding, especially chapter 10, chapter 11, are happening in the areas of Gilead where you see the blue area. But that blue area is just pointing out the name. What it does is it takes in basically the area that you're seeing right here that goes all the way down to the Jabbok or the Arnon River. Jabbok is right along in here, but the Arnon River. So it takes in a lot of this area. The Ammonites, of course, were living in this area right along in here as well. And there's another area that we'll be talking about in this vicinity in a little bit as well. So all of this is part of what we're seeing right now is the events that are taking place where Jair was concerned. And you'll look at some of the other maps. And fact of the matter is, I think one of them even has it. Let's see. If I can find it, you can see where the Ammonites on that map would be. Let me see if there was one that I was thinking about. Maybe okay. I may think of it in just a little bit as to where this was. If it hits my mind, I'll bring it up. I can't remember exactly which of the maps it was in. Okay. Now, after Jair dies, as we stated, we'll just call him Jair because that's what we normally do anyway. The cycle of the Israelites' behavior, here it goes again. They've gone back into evil. This is something that brings about the wrath of God again. And they were oppressed, and now again by whom? The Ammonites and the Philistines. They're kind of caught in the middle right here. The greatest portion of this oppression we're going to find out, is coming mostly from the Ammonites, because this is where most of it's going to be taking place. They did cross over and come into this area right here where you've got Ephraim and Judah and Benjamin, the tribes here. And evidently they must have taken some of these people off back in captivity into the area of Gilead. It just seems like that's what has happened. But now, of course, they were not able to take in all the people that would have lived in this area. And of course, there were still some even that remained in the areas of Judah and Benjamin and Ephraim. But some of them, of course, evidently seems to have been taken now. Now then, we had gotten, we were gotten down through verse 15, I believe it was, but just now, just kind of remember what it was that we have seen when now that the people find themselves in this situation of distress. You remember we talked about last week, they began to cry unto the Lord. And we saw in verse 11, the Lord said unto him, and this is one of the statements, incidentally, that we found to be a little bit interesting. Normally, we don't see that phraseology as being all that interesting. God said unto them, but we were interested in it because we wanted to know who precisely he's talking to. And it may have, in fact, been the high priest or one of the priests that might have been able to relay this message off to the people of Israel. Otherwise, it would have been in an encampment somewhere. And if that was going to take place, that would most likely be taking place in and around the areas of Jerusalem or somewhere perhaps up in the areas of Ephraim, Shechem, wherever it is, because not too long beforehand, remember, the tabernacle is up in the area of Shechem. And so if it's still there and a lot of the people are encamping at that particular point, you would think maybe the God of heaven is going to descend in the cloud and whatever, and then again speaks to the people. But that does not seem to relate to this situation here, since we're primarily dealing with these areas at this particular point. So I have a feeling that it might be either a priest or high priest or something of this nature where he's passing on this information. Otherwise, it could be a father of one of the families or something of that sort, and then sending the message on, who's someone of the elders of the Jews. Ever how he does it, he's spoken to them and told them, now, I'm not going to come to your defense at this particular point anymore because of your rebellious state. And what you're going to have to do now is you're going to have to put away the gods. He talked about the different gods that they'd been serving, and we went through all of that. All right. Now we come to verse 15 again. You remember, you're seeing the terms of penitence that they're claiming. We've sinned. Okay. So that's a confession, right? That's a confession of sin. Now, there's a difference. I think we've talked about this before. There is a difference between confession and repentance. What's the difference? Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. One of them is just simply acknowledging the fact you've done it, but repentance is quitting. It's stopping. The problem that a lot of people have is they think if they confess the sin, that signifies that they've repented of it. No, there are people I know of that have confessed their sin and gone right back to doing the very same thing. So it's altogether different right here. So remember, again, we were a little bit amused at the statement that they made at the second portion of the passage, that thou do unto us whatever seems to be good to you. If that's kind of a ruse in my estimation, but if you're going to subject us to punishment or anything like that, that's all fine and good, but what was the last phrase? Deliver us today. Only deliver us today. So the previous statement, when you look at it in context, there is really rather hypocritical and silly. Yeah. But in other ways, don't do that. Just deliver us. Okay. That's what they really mean. Right. Yeah. That's what I've been doing. You've been in this 18 years, in case you haven't noticed. And so the fact that I'm thinking about not caring. In fact, the matter is, he didn't. He's not going to deliver them at this particular point for some little while longer. But the fact that they're in the oppression that they're in right now is a clear indication he's doing to them what he will. And they're not in the position to say otherwise. Now, they can plead their case. But again, it's going to involve a bit more than just confessing the sin. They're going to have to show. So, that being stated, now we come to verse 16. We pick up where we left off. And they put away the strange gods from among them and served the Lord. And his soul was grieved for the misery of Israel. So, they evidently did. Obviously, that they're working on their penitence, and that seems to suggest that now perhaps they may have thought about the foolishness of the previous plea that they have made, that was not going to be something that the Lord was going to hear. Do with us what you will, only deliver us now. That just seemed to be obviously something that is inconsistent. So they may be taking that into account. It seems time has passed and there's nothing that's happening where God's relationship to them is concerned and helping them to be delivered. So they're evidencing now their penitence, because it tells us that they are serving the Lord. And at this point still, God has not responded yet, but it does tell us in the text that he grieved. His soul was vexed. And which is an interesting term, katsar in the Hebrew, which is an agricultural term, strangely enough, which means to harvest or cut down. But it's also a word that's used to describe something that is straightened or shortened. So what do you think that suggests? His soul grieved. It's being straightened or shortened. Well, that's something that it has been at this particular point. It seems to be entering into the mix, because now, at the point he told them that he wasn't going to help them anymore, that his long suffering had basically come to an end. But now he's evidently seeing the penitence. His anger now is shortened. So that's exactly right. What we should remember another incident that's similar to this. Not really dealing with the people as a whole. In fact, it's dealing with one individual. It's dealing with a city and a particular preacher that's supposed to go tell that city. Nineveh, city of Nineveh, talking about Jonah. And Jonah goes, we know somebody by the name of Jonah. He was told to go to Nineveh and to preach what? Repentance to those people, because they've got, okay, 40 days you don't, you're going, well, they evidently did. And so what was it that God did then? Okay, he repented of himself. That is, he changed his mind and his direction about what it was that he was going to do to the city of Nineveh. So he did not destroy them. And so what you're seeing in this situation, that is, long suffering had come to an end, but now that he's seeing their penitence, he's seeing the fact that they're making the effort to serve him now, then his judgment against them, his wrath with them is becoming shorter. So he's looking at them with through a little bit different prism at this particular point in time. And he's now listening to their misery. So now the misery seems to be more, how shall we say it? Okay. It's more of a sincere situation, because now they may have been oppressed before these 18 years, but they're looking at that, well, so be it, it is what it is. And, right. Yeah. Right. And it also tells me a little bit about circumstances regarding some of the people as well, but not all of them were of the same disposition to serve these gods and to turn away from them. But it is the case, a lot of situations like what we see like this, those that are faithful sometimes suffer with the wicked. And so we find that a lot in our country with the circumstances as we see things today as well. So anyway, part of this is also indicated the service to the Lord was putting away the strange gods. And we might ask the question, either in that respect or as it might be added to this, what otherwise would be involved in their service unto the Lord? Now, that's an open question. There's not anything specifically stated in the text, but what would you think that might furthermore be involved in their service unto the Lord? All right, they're probably returning to sacrifices. They're probably being more involved in going back to the area of where the tabernacle may be for certain feasts, together with the priest, worshiping, all of these particular things that they should have been doing all together all along anyway. They may be more mindful about their need for compassion and being benevolent-minded type of individual, things that they evidently were not doing before, because it seems that they were more just self-centered. Because that's what wicked people usually do. That's how generally they think. So this may be something that's involved in their service unto the Lord. The fact that they did have idols, I think, indicates a couple of different things. Number one, we know that they had attained idols where? All right, when they left Egypt, they took some of the spoils. And so there were several different images that they had and kept. Now, they had already been told to get rid of these. Who told them? Joshua made it specific. Yeah. He told them when they came into the land, you remember they were at Shechem at that particular point in time, around the area of Mount Ephraim, and it was on the day that Joshua died. He makes it clear to them. You remember chapter 24, verse 15. I choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the God of Amorites in the land you dwell, or the gods of your fathers on the other side of the flood, which means on the other side of the Euphrates, and the gods of Amorites whose land you dwell, but for me and my house will serve the Lord. And then goes on to point out that you're going to need to put away the strange gods that you have among you. And, but we're going to be servants unto God. We'll be just like you are and things of this nature. And Joshua told him, no, you're not. You're not willing to repent yet. You haven't done those things as of yet. Oh, yes, we will. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. And then he puts it on the record. It's inscribed in the law or on the record that this is the accepting of this challenge, and that they have committed themselves to that, and also erected a particular stone to commemorate that fact that they had done that. And then after he dies and after the elders are gone, here they go again. And so it was all moot. So now here you got a situation where, again, it is brought to their attention by the Lord. You're going to have to get rid of these things. And now it states that this is one of the things they're doing. Where else would they have gotten some of these images? Okay. So when it came into the land, which is in the vicinity right along here where Jericho would have been, they're going to be taking over the different areas of where those among the different tribes of the Canaanites would have been, and they were idol worshipers. And so in taking those things, they would end up securing some of those images, which were generally made of precious stones and things of this nature, metals and that kind of thing. So they're keeping. I have a tendency to think, there may be different reasons for it, but I have a tendency to think that some of the images they brought in from Egypt were just simply used as not only just keepsakes because of what it was that had taken place, have been passed down through families, but it's also a source. If they were made of gold or silver or anything of this nature, you've got a source of income that might be brought from these things. But for whatever reason, they still possess them. And they're being told now that they need to get rid of them. So they're starting to do that, evidently. And the text states that God grieved now for the misery of these people. That brings out the question. We've kind of touched on it just a little bit, but we're looking, as we pointed out at the outset of this study, one of the things that we're going to discover through the course of the study is a little bit about the nature of God. So we might ask ourselves the question now, based on what we have seen thus far with them, why grieve for them? If you just look at it from the standpoint of how we think of it. Okay. You love them. Right. Right. He knows that through him, he's got to bring about this promise, although at one time, you recall, he had threatened not to do so. He was going to end this and change it and go through Moses. And until Moses talked him out of it. But it is the fact, at least, that they, and it's not these other nations, are the ones that are acknowledging him at this point anyway. Even if it took this long of a time for them to realize where their bread's buttered, where their blessings come, where their victories come, then so be it. And that's the way it is. And let me just, before I make that point, let me just ask that in the form of a question. What's the lesson that we can learn practically from this situation ourselves? A practical lesson we can apply from this circumstance.
You have to be truly sorrowful in your heart. You have to truly repent. I mean, you got to turn back to God. He can.
Well, you got to stay with it.
He's there, but you got to, if you do walk away and you come back, you've got to mean what you say.
Mm-hmm.
God knows what they feel. They have been crying out to him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But until they took the actions and they truly meant it, he was still not going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Parent and child, you have children, and they grieve you. You don't give them up. You do everything you can to help them. I know you might have their advantage on occasion when they're little, but then when they get bigger, they start slipping on your heart, and you just have to know how much you love them, how much you, and that's God. How much does he love us? We are not perfect.
Guys, like we talked about now, God is long suffering. He is with us. We pray for it, and we should. Father, be long suffering with us. I pray quite often on occasion. I know I'm a test of your patience. Just keep patient with me. But it is the fact that we realize that when we work against God and we abide in wickedness or sinfulness or anything of that nature, we have to come to an understanding that God is not going to be with us. He's not going to fellowship us. What does the concept of fellowship mean? Okay. Working hand in hand, joint participation, ever how you want to define it. But he's not going to be in fellowship with us, which means that we are ostracized from him. We're essentially on our own. But as long as we're walking with him, we may have enemies and obstacles that we have to face, and he's not going to miraculously help us get over it. But with our faith, providence does play a little bit of a role in some things. And Bible tells us that as Paul mentions in Hebrews 13, he repeats the statement that Moses and Joshua made to the people of Israel: I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And if we are with him, he's with us. Things are better. Blessings come that we may not even recognize. That's the reason we pray for all of them, even those that we don't even know or don't recognize. And so these people had become evidently oblivious to this and thinking that it was more business or pleasure that was really the total of life. It's not a new philosophy. It's been around a while, and even as we think of it nowadays, it's called a new morality. It's not really so new. It's something that's been around for a long, long time. And so they're paying the price for the messes that they have made. And we think about, let me ask this question too: what significance can we draw from his grief? Yeah.
He has emotions as we do.
We're made in his image. We feel grief. We feel disappointment. All of these things, as I was talking about a little while ago, that as parents, sometimes we have grief over our children because of misbehavior or certain things of this nature. But we feel and should feel as he feels. The fact that we should feel grief ought to indicate to us, I'm looking at the concept of grief where we're concerned synonymously with something else. Can you read my mind? If you don't, I will just simply use it synonymously with guilt. Okay? Godly sorrow leadeth thee to repentance, right? And these people evidently are feeling that now. They're feeling the sorrow because of what it was that they had done, the guilt that has now come to their attention. We're in this situation because we put ourselves there.
It's the same in the church now.
Right.
Somebody won't repent and have to withdraw.
Yeah.
The purpose of that is that they have that sorrow and that they
Bring them to that guilt and bring them out of that pompous rebellion. And this is how he's done that. He's basically, well, just what the statement is. I'm not going to be with you. He's withdrawn from them. And it's to bring them to that. Right. And so now they are making that effort. Now let's look at verse 17. Now that he's seen what it is that they're doing, he has now reassessed their circumstances. So we go apart from this now, and then the children of Ammon were gathered together and encamped in Gilead, most likely in these areas right in here. And the children of Israel assembled themselves together and encamped in Mizpah. Now, this might be a little bit confusing. I have a feeling that the area where they're encamped is right where that last arrow came up. And that's in Ramoth Mizpah. There is a Mizpah in the area around Judah here, over in this area. Okay? I do not think that this is the one that it is. It seems to be the Mizpah is Ramoth Mizpah that's in the area of Gilead, because this is where most all of this business is taking place. So when we kind of put into our heads where things are happening at this particular point, that seems to be the area. Now, it's common to the rebellious nature of Israel. You've now got also the pompous disposition of those that are their oppressors. Now, as we pointed out a minute ago, there seems to be still a number of Canaanites or the Israelites in the area of Canaan, but many of them, you've got a whole lot of them over here. Don't forget, all right, right here, this area is the tribe of East Manasseh. Gad starts right here and comes all the way down to this area. And then you got the tribe of Reuben. So you got 3 tribes of Israel still on this side anyway. Okay? So you got a number of Israelites already here, not to mention all the others that are on the other side. Remember, they've already attacked over here and most likely brought in some of the Israelites back over into the area of Gilead now. Now then, yes, sir.
And this is an overstatement, but Moses and especially Joshua talks about all the wars and battles and so forth.
Yeah.
They didn't do a very efficient job of cleaning out.
They didn't, no. Now we saw, as we studied early on in the book, the conquest that they were to make. And they were to eliminate those people. They were supposed to eliminate them. I'm talking eliminate. They were not to just depose them. They were to eliminate these people. And there was the reason for all of that in taking the land is the very thing that Moses and Joshua had told them, because if you don't do these things, you're going to end up getting in with them. You're going to end up mating with them. There's going to all be this fellowship that's going to be taking place and the joining in with them, and you're going to end up leaving me and serving idols, which is the very thing that has happened. So they did fail in all of that. Now they've been paying the price for all these years. And what you're seeing again now is, all right, you got these men that are gathering up in Gilead right here. They're going to invade. In fact, they're going to, again, invade Judah. That's what they're planning on doing right here. So whether it is the case that we're talking about this Mizpah here or this one here, one way or the other, what we're finding that is that the Israelites he's talking about here, they're making their camp in Mizpah, which is here or there. I still know the impression that it might be the one over in Gilead now. So they're readying themselves for battle because they know that it's coming. And so they're preparing while they're in Mizpah here. Now, it's also evident that they've got spies everywhere. And because now the Israelites have gathered, the Ammonites have evidently learned of it. And so at this particular point, they're going to treat this information with a little bit of disdain. So this is what you're going to see coming up in verse 18. They're so confident in the fact that they're going to besmirch the nation, that especially Israel, for just any thought that they might have had of offering any kind of resistance. And they're presuming that evidently, because now that they're gathering together, they learned that the Jews are gathering together. Most likely they're thinking now they've got a leader of some sort or the other. So now we look at verse 18, and the people and the princes of Gilead said one to another. So now they're putting out this message. We've seen things like this before, haven't we? What man is he that will begin to fight against the children of Ammon? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. If he's presumptuous enough to come to this particular position And if he's able to overcome us, okay, he's going to be head over all the Gileadites and in this situation. Now, what do you find interesting about that? Give your comment about that. Well, they felt good in their own shoes. They felt confident in the circumstances, but that's two particular observations that I kind of viewed on this. If God is finished now with his judgment against Israel, and it seems that that's the case now, these Ammonites have no way of really knowing what that is, but this would be something that if they're seeing the Israelites gathered together, and if they're presuming they have a leader, what should otherwise they have presumed? That God has appointed and he's behind it. And why should they be fearful of that? Yeah, but they've been on this before. Go back to Judges 3. You remember the situation with Ehud. They've already been whipped by Israel before because of this very same situation. So it ought not have been something that had been unfamiliar to them. That ought to have been something that would have gone through their mind. We might need to sit here, elders, and we might need to think about this. If they're gathering up, they must have a leader. If they've got a leader, God's behind this, and if God's behind this, yeah, we might just need to go home, But the fact is, when you look at the statement he's making here too, that whoever it is doing is, what man is he who will begin to fight against the children of Ammon? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. That's another way of saying we have it. If you think you can take it, come and get it. But what was the problem with that? It's not just the fact that God be behind it, but what was the problem with this? It wasn't their land to start with. God's already given it to the Israelites. So it's not theirs to give, But it is the case now. They have control over it at the time, but it's not their land to give away. All right. Question, comment, chapter 10. All right, we go to chapter 11. Here we go. If you look at chapter 11, verse 1, now Jephthah. Where's he from? All right. So it's interesting. You had Jair, who was a Gileadite. So he was from, in fact of the matter is, that's what I was thinking about a moment ago. Let's see. You get back. There is a particular map that shows exactly what I want. I'm supposed to have it on here, but I may not have put it here. But I was rather certain I did. But I wanted to show you the area. You remember when we were looking through that earlier last week, talking about Jair, there was a map, and it's not, I thought I had it on there. It shows the name of the area. How about Jair? And evidently the area of his sons, you remember he had 30 sons that oversaw evidently a number of cities in that area. So anyway, you got another one. And now you got a fellow by the name of Jephthah from this area. Now, how did Gilead get his name? Any idea? Gilead was a man. He's a grandson of Manasseh. Who was Manasseh? Joseph. One of the two sons of Joseph. Right, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, remember, Joseph didn't have a tribe, and neither did the Levites, but you still have 12 tribes. And so Ephraim and Manasseh make up the two. And Manasseh was divided in two parts. In fact, we do have that one. And if you'll notice, you got East Manasseh, West Manasseh. Okay? So it's made up of two parts. And Gilead is the grandson of Manasseh. And you also have this area, and his descendants, incidentally, are going to take his name. So that's the reason for the name of the area as well. It's a mountainous region, as is stated. You can look up in Unger's Bible Dictionary. You'll get this information. It's a mountainous region east of Jordan River, extending from the Sea of Galilee to the upper end of the Dead Sea, which is what we were talking about right along in there where the Jabbok River is, which brings you down to the southern end of the tribe of Reuben. Well, this is the area also known as Gilead. It's about 60 miles long, about 20 miles wide. And you've got the area itself is pretty much, in fact, a mountain range. And if we go back to this map right there, you can see where a lot of the top topography is. You got this mountain range that carries you all the way down to this area. You've got the river Arnon here, Jabbok here, which are mentioned in these. But you can kind of get the idea of the topography. Evidently, it was a beautiful area with the mountains and the valleys that come along. It was rather green and plush, as I understand it. Now, continue verse 1. He was a Gileadite, mighty man of valor, son of a harlot, and Gilead begat Jephthah. So now, we've got a little bit of a strange background. He's the son. His mother evidently is considered a harlot. And incidentally, you have to kind of look in your information as to what that might entail. Because in antiquity, the term harlot could be used in a couple of different ways. One, of course, had to do with prostitutes. The other had to do with innkeepers. But that too was also, how shall we say it? Those were also sometimes prostitutes, but considered as, there's a term we use nowadays of some that oversee prostitutes. We call them madams. And so it may have been something along that line. So there's any number of things that could be used in context of that. In either case, as you're seeing here in verse 2, if you'll notice in verse 2, that she's considered a what? Strange woman. Now, what's the significance perhaps of that language? There. That describes a whole lot, I know. Yeah. Yeah. As I went looking into it, there's 2 or 3 different views that are stated about this. In fact, Josephus had a view. Josephus thought of her as a Gentile, and being a strange woman, and sometimes a strange flesh is usually used in context with those among Gentiles. So it may be that. Some think that it was just a reference to her character, and some others think that it may have a reference to some other race. So it may be an ethnic slur that might have been made against her for one way or the other. So whichever it is, and it really doesn't make any difference, it's evidently, if it has to do with her character, I would suspect it would have been a different term myself. I think it would have been more specific.
You know who's calling her strange? It's wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Except, so exactly. So it could be just simple reference to somebody else, just the character. It could be along that line, but for whatever reason it is, that's the characterization that's been given to her. So just very quickly, we'll look at verse 2, and then we've got some other things here in verse 1 that we need to see, because there's another point that's given about Jephthah here. What is stated about him? Okay, he's a mighty man of valor. So in spite of whatever criteria that they're going to reject him, then no one could really argue that he's a coward, could they? It's evidently a matter of reputation where he's concerned. He is known as a mighty man of valor. The word valor right there from Kayil, I believe it is just simply a term that refers to him as a soldier, one that is war worthy. He knows what he's doing. Very likely the fact that he's been a leader of men. And so he's capable of operating in war and leading men in battle. So now, quickly, verse 2, as we read here, Gilead's wife. Now, this is not Jephthah's mother, but Gilead's wife bare him sons. And of course, you're going back in time now. And his wife's sons grew up, as well as did also Jephthah, and evidently in Gilead's house. And when they grew up, however, when they came of age, they evidently come to realize the state of Jephthah's background and his origin, and they're going to disown him and cast him out. Now, what would be the purpose of that? Stated there, but what would be the purpose? Could have been.
Well, he hadn't had that, and then his must have been something happened before his wife ever had kids.
Could be.
Because you will not inherit.
Yeah.
They don't want to share their inheritance.
They're not wanting to share the inheritance, whichever it is the case, whether he's the oldest or not. I wondered about that situation as to whether or not he, at this particular point, may now have already passed. The possibility, we don't know, because I don't know of anything stated otherwise. But they're not wanting to allow him to be part of the inheritance whatsoever. And so they have cast him out. And it's obvious that he's been living among them as one of the brothers. And what does that tell you? That there's a principle here where the feeling of these boys now have against him. Well, even if that be the case, there's a development of hate and disdain right here. And that's not something that is innate within an individual. You're not born that way. Yeah. Because of the attention that he's gotten from that. True. Because of his, could have been any number of things. But whatever the reasoning was, they have developed a jealousy and a hate. And that's something that had to be taught. Somebody had said something to him disparaging him. Well, if he's a son of that, he's not pure. He's a bastard child. And as a result of that, this is something we can't have that in the household. And well, you got these other sons now. They're going to get together. They're going to discuss that, don't you figure? Yeah, that's the way I feel. That's right. And so when you kind of get together with all of that, then all of a sudden, I think we just need to get him out. Yeah. And
we don't know for sure, but if they knew all along, and they didn't say anything until the father died.
Yeah.
And then they had the opportunity to make a move.
Yeah, that's my thinking, whether it had to do with his death or not. There's something along the way that somebody has informed that's developed this particular position. Because if they grew up together, they were all happy and everything, but because it mentions in the text, and the wife's sons grew up. So at some point in time, somebody spilled the beans and then has initiated this hatred. And right. Right. Yeah. Yep. Well, yeah. The kids can be really good at finding ways to try to belittle somebody. And among brothers, that's something that you always do. You know, now you can do it, but somebody else can't. Yeah, yeah. You know, you deal with, yeah, exactly right. If somebody outside the family says something about Brother Joe or Brother John or something like that, then we get all bent. But you know, if I want to tell him that he's the sorriest thing ever walked the earth, that's all fine and good. But then we're gonna love each other before the day's over. So I mean, and that's kind of the way that works. So, all right. Any other comment? Let's pick up verse 3 then next week, Lord willing. We still living and around, and we'll undertake further study of Book of Judges. We pointed out it's a study that we're learning a great deal still about a lot of the nature of God, and at the same time we learn a lot about ourselves, because we can see typical behaviors in them that we see in us today. So, you know, man really hasn't changed. Circumstances may change, but man himself in dealing with the circumstances with which he may be faced are pretty much the same. That's how we deal with things. Verse 3 next week. There's what's the number before we start?
223.
223.
Having surely be worth it all.
There's a mantra that you will hear among the Marines, some of our armed forces, and that is whatever circumstances you might face, it may be difficult. Sometimes it may seem to be a bit impossible. You remember what that mantra is? You adapt and overcome. You adapt and overcome. Now, of course, we see some of that in circumstances like what we've talked about in the Book of Judges, but it's something that faces us from time to time. There are a lot of obstacles we face in life that are rather inhibitive to our living as faithful as we should. A lot of times those obstacles and temptations come along that in times of our weakness, we may yield and we find ourselves in a sinful condition. When in fact that we see that problems even might arise, let's put it this way, we're not prophets nor sons and daughters of prophets. But you can see tendencies, can you not? And not only with that, you can see past histories of certain circumstances, and that this seems to be repeating itself. Well, when we see things like unto that, we know that it's going to cause some problem as far as our progress as the way we ought to live as a child of God. So we have to learn how to adapt and overcome. Now, when I'm talking about adapting, I'm not talking about compromising the word of truth. You still hold on to the word of truth. You remain faithful to that. But at the same time, learning how to deal with circumstances that keep us from being engaged in whatever the problems are going to be. Maintaining our strength, we might have to fight these things, whatever they may be. That may be part of the adaptive process in fighting and battling these circumstances. But sometimes may be the only thing that's required, just as Solomon tells his son, when you see certain things like this happening, what are you to do? You run. You go the opposite direction. There's an adaptation. And so we overcome. And when you think about that, ladies and gentlemen, it's like dealing with any temptation. You overcome it. The idea of overcoming sometimes is just no more than saying no and making sure that we don't engage. That's overcoming. overcoming the adversary, which is the devil. Because now if we succumb, then he has a victory over us. But it's the matter of the small battles that we have to fight day by day, overcoming all of that, that brings us the ultimate victory. And that is the staying faithful unto death. Then what comes? The crown of life that's been promised. The song's fitting to this, isn't it? Whatever things that we might face in that respect, when we overcome, heaven's surely worth every bit of that, whatever difficulties we might face. If you're here tonight and haven't obeyed the gospel, heaven is surely worth the effort that you might make to come to him in obedience. Or as a child of God that has in fact failed and needs to return and to reconcile with brethren and the Lord that paid the price for them. Whatever the need may be, we're here to help. Sing the song as we would. It might stand if we could. If he comes. My way burns away on the sun. Then I hear Jesus sweetly say, and worship Him worthy Lord, and worship Him worthy Lord. Work of the sorrows that made me fall, after life with all its life, and worship Redeemer in all. Toiling and pain, I will endure, till I shall meet the angel fall. Jesus hath come, this time I'm sure, and worship Redeemer worthy Lord, and worship Redeemer worthy Lord. Work of the sorrow that you behold, after life with all its life, and worship Thee worthy Lord. Standing, if you would. Be ready to dismiss in just a second. Don't forget our service is Sunday at 9, 10, and 11. Now, let's urge others to come and be with us and take opportunity as well. Our Wednesday evening classes